I feel like there's just such a huge disconnect with women even feeling their womb or knowing their womb. And that was me for a long time.
I don't really want to talk about it. Like, I remember the first time I said yoni on like Instagram, it was like terrifying, or like even just saying womb, I was like, oh, I'm gonna write this post.
I really feel like right now, this generation of women, we are here to break those chains, to do things differently, to do the healing for not only ourselves, but for women before us and women who are coming after us.
The first step of tending to your womb and building a relationship with your womb is finding what stories are held there. And these stories can be hard and challenging and ugly, and they can like ask you to descend into like the depths of your own darkness, or they can be liberating, and oftentimes they're both. Like once we descend, it's like, oh, okay, there's this huge opening that happens and reclamation. And it's really just about decoding your own womb story.
We can start to see it not from a lens of shame or like there's something wrong, but more from a place of like, oh wow, there's a lot of wisdom in there. I'm really excited to have you here and to bring the conversation about womb wisdom to the feminine frequency. Believe it or not, and maybe you do believe this, we actually haven't covered this topic.
Wow.
And when I've been seeing your content and really just like witnessing your magic and your wisdom, I was like, oh, this is a conversation that is so, so needed. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And I'm excited to see what we unpack and what we open up today together.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I find it so like wild that womb wisdom hasn't like had a seat at this table, but
Yeah.
also I know that there's a divine timing for that. I'm really grateful to be, you know, the first person to fully focus on this on your podcast. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that women are ready for it.
Yeah.
I think that even your work right now is, I mean, it's ancient, but there's like, there's a remembering that's happening. And I do feel that, like you said, there's a divine timing of, you know, when women are ready to receive. And for the women who are listening, like there's not an accident that you felt called to listen to this episode today.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I find that that's the beautiful part of the womb is that like when you are ready, she's like, oh, hey, I'm here. And sometimes that might be like a rude awakening, or it might be like a gentle calling. And it doesn't matter whatever that is, whatever wakes you up to the womb, but it is like a very divine timed thing. Nobody's like, oh, I think I want to connect with my womb. It's like, oh, I need to connect with my womb.
She speaks to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or life speaks to you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am so curious for you. What was that moment or experience? Was it a single experience where you felt called to connect with your womb? Was it a sequence of events? Like, tell me more about how you started connecting to your own womb.
Yeah. So my journey to connecting with my womb actually came through trauma, like big T trauma. At the age of 19, I was sexually assaulted by somebody that I trusted. And at that point, I was already kind of into energy work and like meditation, and had studied in Reiki from like a very young age. And so when this happened, it was like devastating. I was just this like young little social butterfly, naive girl out there in the spiritual world. And then this very traumatic event happened. And initially when it happened, I kind of was like shut off from God and like faith and trust. And like at that time, like I said, I was already kind of practicing Reiki and energy work, and just felt like I couldn't trust all of those kinds of things because the guy that actually hurt me was like an energy healer and like a teacher in that way, and kind of used that as manipulation. So it was a really big deal. And I went through this period of time shortly after where I just didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe to like talk about what had happened to me, or to like get support or resources. And there was just so much pain like in my physical body, in my womb from this experience. It was affecting my relationship. My husband and I were together at that point. So like sexually, like our relationship was just like diminishing. And eventually I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired and like feeling this trauma in my body, and like had to remember that like I learned these tools of like energy work and self-care for this. So I actually got connected with like a womb healer through a women's circle. So I finally went to a women's circle, and it was like my turn to talk, and I was like, I was raped. Like, and it just like came out of me, just like a flush of like, I need to to talk about this. And little like did I know that almost every woman in that room had also had their own journey of experiencing harm in this way, or being hypersexualized and feeling uncomfortable, not being able to speak their truth. And it was a really big awakening for me. So I got connected to a womb healer who started off with doing womb steams.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met a friend on Instagram who was doing womb massage and, taught me how to do that on myself. And then I found a teacher and like went and received from her. And it kind of just was this like unraveling path of like, oh, okay, this is what's working. Like being in touch with my body, using like plants and my own hands and receiving other hands of other women and talking about my story is what has been healing. And it kind of just got to this point of like self-healing where I was like, wow, this is really working. This is really powerful. Not only is it healing my own trauma, like I'm awakening into a whole new version of myself and finding confidence, which I'd always struggled with from a young age. And feeling comfortable speaking and expressing myself and just feeling safe in the world, not from my environment, but from who I am within. And I kind of was just like, to not go deeper would be a disservice. So that's where I started studying more and like hiring teachers and mentors and just reading and like taking up as much as I could of womb wisdom and like how to heal our bodies as women. And started to practice with other women, very small, like doing energy healing sessions. And it took a long time for me to kind of come out and say that, hey, I was like raped, it was like a very scary thing for me to like talk about. But I would just like have these energy healing sessions where I was honest that like I loved womb healing and like yoni steaming and like, but it was kind of still in the closet a little bit. And women would just like come and have these energy sessions with me, and what would come up would be like a lot of times stuff around sex and things that had happened to them. Everything like STDs, like sexual trauma, like just all across the board. And I was like, wow, okay, like something's happening. So then I started to figure out like, okay, how can I heal my relationship with my story so that other women not only can feel safe telling me their story, but like they know that I am somebody who is safe. And it's not just like on the healing table or on our call, they're like, finally going to open up about it, but it's like they know that I am somebody that they can come to right off the bat. So it's been a really powerful journey for me. And it's just one of those things that I'm like so devoted to because it has been monumental in my own experience as a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some pieces there that feel really important to highlight. One of them is that the first time that you felt comfortable sharing what had happened to you was in a women's circle. And I've seen this so many times, whether it's on retreats or gathering and bringing women together when we have this field of connected feminine support. Right? Where women are coming to this space to be held, to be seen, to support each other, and they want to be around other women. And there's something really beautiful about those sacred spaces where there is this feeling of safety and non-judgment, and where there was a part of you that felt safe enough to be like, wow, this happened to me. And often exactly what you shared, what happens is when one woman is courageous to share something very vulnerable, something that maybe they've had shame around and been afraid to talk about or haven't been ready to talk about, then what happens is other women who are sitting in that same circle and witness that woman are like, oh, wow, yeah, I'm not alone. And then there's this support that happened, and, you got these beautiful resources and it sent you down this path. And I love what you also shared about, that you went through your own healing journey and it was so important to you and made such a big impact that you were like, okay, I want to be this space for other women, and I want to create spaces for women who have experienced something similar, to be able to have these resources and tools to heal. And for women who are, maybe in the beginning stages of exploring their connection to their womb, whether they have or haven't had past sexual trauma or experiences, what would you say to a woman who's like, oh, wow, I feel like there's something here for me?
I love that question. Well, the first thing that comes up is that we all have our own story. And it doesn't matter if you have like little t trauma or big T trauma or even identify as having trauma at all. We all have our own story of what it means to be a woman. And it's undeniable. Like if you are in a female body and you have female anatomy, you have a womb. And this is a very powerful part of your body. It controls, so much of your life with our menstrual cycle and pregnancy and birth and all, just like our whole life as women. There's this monumental organ that requires us to pay attention to it. And the interesting thing is that our womb, at least in my perspective, in my studies, is that the womb is a record keeper. And so she holds on to our life story. And the reason that I believe this is because inside of my womb and your womb and every woman's womb is like we have these eggs. And inside those eggs is the eggs of like our future descendants, not just our children, but our children's children. And there's this kind of thing that happens as we like increase our awareness of like, okay, well, there's future children inside my womb, not just my own, but like my grandchildren. And there's epigenetics and like DNA and memory gets transferred down and ancestral trauma and things like this. So from my perspective, when I look at that, I'm like, okay, the womb is like keeping score and like she's keeping records and like there's information held within the womb. And also when we look at the physical kind of anatomy of the womb is filled with connective tissue, which is also fascial tissue and connects directly to our nervous system and our brain. And so our life experience gets held in this place, not only energetically and spiritually, but physically too.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what your story is, there's something there. And so I think for women who are first kind of feeling that calling to their womb work, or perhaps they've been on this path and they're looking to deepen, it's like the first step of tending to your womb and building a relationship with your womb is finding what stories are held there. And these stories can be hard and challenging and ugly, and they can like ask you to descend into like the depths of your own darkness, or they can be liberating and oftentimes they're both. Like once we descend, it's like, oh, okay, there's this huge opening that happens and reclamation. And it's really just about decoding your own womb story.
I love that. And I feel like that's even a beautiful place for women to start, like taking out their journal and exploring this. And I'll share, one story that comes to mind for me, which is more around my menstrual cycle, was when I first got my menstrual cycle, I experienced a lot of shame when I like shared with my parents. I shared with my mom that I had started my period, and she was like, "Oh, I'm going to go, I want to tell your dad." And I was like, "Why would you do that?" Like I was so mortified. And the reason, for her, it was like a celebratory thing.
Yeah.
And for me, I just like, I wasn't ready for that. I didn't have that connection to the fact that this was like an initiation into womanhood and all of that. I was just like, no, that's private. Like, I don't really want to share that information. Right. And so I think we all have stories, even around menstruation, that really connect us as women. This is one of the topics that when I've taught it in the feminine codes and online course, and when I bring this to my clients in group programs, that it's the one thing that connects all women. Like we all have our own experience with our menstrual cycles and with our hormones and with this aspect of life, this cyclical nature. And I think probably similar to womb work, like the more in touch we can get with our cycles and with our wombs, it's really empowering. Like we can start to see it not from a lens of shame or like there's something wrong, but more from a place of like, oh, wow, there's a lot of wisdom in there.
Oh my gosh, yes. I love that you brought up this story with like your first time menstruating and getting your bleed and feeling ashamed, because in my practice, we have actually like a framework for starting to uncover your womb story.
Hmm.
And the first one is actually when we were born. So conception and birth, like there's a story there. And a lot of times that story has a lot to do with like creation. Like, how do you feel about creation? How do you feel about being welcomed into a new space? And then we have menstruation, which is a lot about like letting go, releasing, being seen, and like your crunchy, like darkness, and there's a lot of shame there, usually for women, me included.
Hmm.
And then the last one, not the last one, but the third primary one we start to look at is our first time having sex.
Hmm.
And so all of these kinds of stories have their own narrative that come along with them. And I always tell women, like, you can't change your story. Like, your story is your story. Like, you getting your bleed and like feeling like, oh my gosh, mom, please don't tell dad, like, and having shame and like fear come up around that. It's your story and it's okay. But like, if there's a narrative around that is still lingering in your system, then that's what we want to tend to, is the narrative around that story. So I think it's really cool because, like you said, the more that we connect to like, what are these stories and like what's happening in my womb and like, how do I feel about my menstrual cycle? It's like a reclamation that does affect our cyclical nature and how we feel in our bodies, and really touching in with like, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be in my feminine? The cycle is a perfect place to really look at that.
hmm Yeah, so beautiful. And even something as simple as, women having the connection with, like, physically in their body with their womb because of past experiences, because of sexual trauma, because of the way that we're not really taught about our bodies and our sexuality and our pleasure. Like, I feel like there's just such a huge disconnect with women even feeling their womb or knowing their womb, and that was me for a long time. And I know there's even deeper layers that I could go into exploring connecting with my womb. But for women who maybe are like, I don't even know like where to start with
hmm
like having that connection to my body, is there anything that you would invite for them to start thinking about?
Yeah. The interesting thing is that so many of us feel that the like
Hmm
taboo, the unknown, like we don't really want to talk about it. Like I remember the first time I said yoni on like Instagram, it was like terrifying, or like even just saying boom, I was like, oh, I'm gonna write this post. And it was like many years ago. And it's taboo.
hmm
And like there's a reason that society and like social constructs have made it to where us as women feel like insecure, not only about the way that we like look down there, but like how we feel about our cycle, having to like just fit in this like masculine status quo and not honoring our cycle. And I think for a lot of women, the big fear is actually showing up in that and like going against the status quo and being like, oh, wait, actually, like instead of me pushing myself or hiding away this feminine part of me, like my womb and like however my anatomy looks or feels, it's like turning that around and being like, okay, why? Like, why am I made out to feel insecure about this or uncomfortable? Or why do I have resistance to going into the womb? So many women have resistance. Like, and I actually was talking about this with a client recently, is like that resistance that you feel when I'm inviting you into womb work or another practitioner is inviting you into womb work or just looking at your womb
hmm
is like the fear inside your body that's been imposed upon you,
hmm
you know? And so for women who are coming up against that, my deepest recommendation is to just tread lightly.
hmm
There's no need to like rush in and like figure it all out or do something really big. Just like start small. Start with your menstrual cycle, or just start with like bringing your hand to your lower abdomen and like feeling yourself breathe in your womb and notice how that grounds you. Like really, the womb is so simple. I think a lot of times we try to overcomplicate healing work in general, but the womb is so simple.
hmm
And all it takes is like you acknowledging her and like connecting your mind with the womb and like dropping into her
hmm
for her to feel that exhale and like
hmm
to soften and take up space. So find what works for you. Like you don't need, just because womb work looks something for one woman doesn't mean it needs to look like that for you. Like you can start where you feel comfortable and deepen from there.
Yeah, I love that word grounding. And I feel like that's so much what I feel, because when we're in our head, which is very often, unless you're practicing embodiment work and womb work, but we get in
Oh
our
yeah.
heads, right? And so having that practice, whether it's putting your hand on your womb and taking a breath or
hmm
starting to connect with even the lower chakras, it really does anchor and ground us and root us. And a lot of women, they want to feel more peaceful. They want to feel more grounded. They want to feel more relaxed. And I think this type of work helps us to root down, not just in our body, but I would say even like root down into who we really are,
hmm
into the truth of who we are.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talk about this connection of womb work and women living in their potential and really living in their power. And I'd love for you to kind of unpack that a little bit more, how it has maybe womb work helped you to live in your power more.
I love this. Okay,
Hmm
so for me, if I look at my story or some of my clients' stories and just the patterns that I see, is when we are disconnected from our womb, whether that's through hard things that we've experienced or shame, whatever it is, there's a sense of survival mode that we're in, right?
hmm
And the reality is like we're living in crazy times. We have wild ancestral trauma, we have personal trauma that we've gone through. And it can be really destabilizing. And we need practices that ground us. And for women, womb work is kind of a no-brainer because, like we said, just taking that deep breath into her grounds you. And what does that do? It shifts you out of that sympathetic nervous system state into the parasympathetic, and you're out of survival mode, even if it's just for a time period before you go back to having to tend to something that maybe feels activating. And where I started to get really interested in, especially as like a highly sensitive person and just have like my own history of like feeling overwhelmed or, socially awkward in some capacities, I found that the more I deepened my relationship with my womb, the more expanded I felt in my capacity, everything from like social capacity to my work capacity or my capacity to be in love, to receive my partner. And so I think that that's really like where I love to focus these days, is like really stepping into your power, your pleasure, and your purpose through womb work. And like, of course, we have to do some like trauma healing and like look at the other stuff that's like held up in there in order to access that freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're looking at somatics, it's like the body will hold on to that which you're not ready to feel. And so when you enter a safe space where you're ready to feel something that's been like holding you back, well, underneath whatever that is, that story or whatever's been holding you back is your power,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like fucking freedom. It feels so good. And when you embody that and you embrace it, your capacity is like so gracefully expanded. It's not like this like edgy thing that you have to like push yourself towards. It's just like, oh, okay, I have space. I have space to express this or do this thing that I was once scared of, or, open my heart in this greater capacity. And for me, that is feminine power, is being able to unapologetically live your life in whatever domain you want to live it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And our work is very, very aligned in that way of supporting women through the body to reconnect with their pleasure, power, and purpose. Yeah. Yeah.
It's big.
That's what we're here for in this time. Like that's
yeah.
what, and you've talked about, looking at generational trauma or generational shame patterns that have been passed down. And I really feel like right now, this generation of women, we are here to break those chains, to do things differently, to do the healing for not only ourselves, but for women before us and women who are coming after us. And so let's talk a little bit more about this generational healing that's available right now.
Oh, it's huge. And I think it really starts with just like acknowledging that like our mothers did not have the capacity or the tools to look at the stuff that was passed down to them, or even to like know what to do with that, right? Like for a lot of women, like our mothers' way of handling the things that they went through was just to stay quiet. And maybe a small percentage of us do have moms who were looking at this kind of stuff and into healing, but it was like so taboo and under the table that it was just a whole different time. But our generation of women, because of social media and like our resources of books and just the conscious awakening that's happening right now for the entire world, we have tools, we have knowledge. And what happens when we have that is then we start remembering and reflecting on like, okay, there's something there, and what do I want to do with it? And so I think for women, it's really important because of the epigenetics of like the maternal lineage and the like actual science of like how we receive, information and DNA from the maternal lineage and how that passes on. And like I said about, I was an egg inside of my grandmother. So the things that my grandmother went through was like kind of being encoded in my own little egg that was inside of her. And I just think that it's cool in a way that we can kind of look at that, and that science is catching up with this kind of ancient wisdom that like, okay, there's something happening here. There's something happening where we're not just our own people and it's not just nature and nurture. It's like there's stuff being passed down. And I don't know, I just think that we're privileged. We're in a privileged era where we can actually do this work. We have the capacity, we have the knowledge and the skills. And so I kind of live in a way that's like, why not? And there's some things that I can't heal with my family through conversations or like heart to heart moments. Like there's things that I have to heal in my own body and our relationship. And thank goddess I have those tools, because it does make it easier for me to live and feel access to that power, because it's a real thing. Like if you grew up in a family that didn't talk about your emotions, was like full of shame around sexuality or the body, you had to be in your head and like type A and do good in school, that's going to pass into your adulthood, right? So you have to work on those things and acknowledge, oh, like my dad and my mom were this way because their parents were like really freaking hard on them. And that was the only way that they felt like they could, you know, be seen as good or acceptable by their parents. And so they imposed that on me. It's like there's themes that we can work through and acknowledge. And it's, for me, it's been easier
Mm-hmm.
to like love my parents, to be like, oh, like that was happening to you too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, as you're talking, I'm literally just having like all of these flashes of like different experiences with like maternal lineage and also even like my dad's mom, who I feel like I'm like the most similar to her out of
Mm-hmm.
everyone in my family. And I can just see how like the choices that I've made and the empowerment that I've stepped into, like she didn't have that, and she wanted it so bad, you know. And so to really even tap into that, like, yes, what a privilege it is that we are living in this time where we have, you know, lots more access to resources, and just women in society do have a lot more choices now.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, what was coming through with my maternal lineage is even things around like body image, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like that's so huge where we, you know, at least my mom grew up in a world where there was a lot of diet culture. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that anyone who didn't look a certain way, you know, there was a lot of shame around that. And that even when we're young girls, we observe that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And whether someone has directly said something about our body or not, we watch how our moms relate to their bodies as
Mm-hmm.
well and how they talk about their bodies. And yeah, I feel like those are like clear examples, but then there's other stuff that's a lot more subtle. There's stuff that's more on the nervous system level where,
Mm-hmm.
you know, whether there was trauma or stress and things like that, and that gets passed down to
Mm-hmm.
us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh
so it's
yeah.
interesting to think about the larger patterns and then also like the subtle
Mm-hmm.
patterns that we don't even have to know the story of our grandmother or great grandmother, and it
Yeah.
still is imprinted in some way.
Oh yeah. I'm like totally the first person that's like, I'm nothing like my mom. And then sometimes I'm like, oh, that's where it is. And it is a lot of the subtle for me. So it's
Yeah.
cool to catch it, and then also can be like mind boggling of like, ooh, okay, what do I want to do with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so, like you said earlier, just because there are stories, like we can't change our stories, but we can change how they impact us
Mm-hmm.
moving forward, or how
Mm-hmm.
what we choose to do with those stories moving forward.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think it's cool because if we like bring it back to the womb, it's like we were inside our mothers, and like our like entire physical body and vitality was like reliant on our mothers. And our nervous system is literally budding and building inside of our mom. And then we're born, and like our nervous system, I think, at least in my belief, is still synced up with mom.
Hmm.
And then until you're about like 8 or 9, when your subconscious is fully formed, then you become more independent. But so much of those early childhood developmental years are like synced up to your mom,
Hmm.
you know, and like a little bit to dad. But I think there's a lot with mom because we hold that like nurturance for our children.
Hmm.
And so when I look at that and I'm thinking about womb wisdom or like the things that we inherit from our mothers, it's like we have to kind of come into our own. And a lot of times, in order to reclaim our own essence and like our own nervous system state, and to do that kind of healing where we rewire our systems, we have to acknowledge like, oh, where did I pick that up from? You know, you can't just like rip it out and like be like, I'm new. It's like you kind of have to follow the thread and be like, oh, okay, there's the center point. This is coming from mom. Okay, I'm going to send her that healing. I'm going to love her anyway, even though I gained this from her, and I'm going to forgive it so that I can open up into something new.
Mm. Yeah. And I'm even thinking, I think my mom had me when she was 23.
Hmm.
And if you just think
Yeah.
about that, and my family is like originally from South Africa. I think I shared that with you last night. And so before I was born, my parents moved away from my grandparents. They moved to a different country for a better future for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've thought about that, like what that must have been like for my mom to not have like her parents around and her family around in those like early stages. And they had friends and stuff. But when I start to think about that, it allows for that deeper compassion of, like what was her experience and what was my experience as like in her belly when she was pregnant, and then also as a very young infant with that life experience that she was having at the time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of moms, especially in like our parents' generation, felt kind of lonely,
Hmm.
and like then we're born and it's like there's can still be that kind of tendency. And it was like so much harder to ask for help, a
Hmm.
few decades ago. Now, I mean, moms still feel lonely now and there's still challenges, but I think that we are like the village is like slowly
Hmm.
rebuilding, which is beautiful. But yeah, it's really interesting when you look at those kinds of things and you can have like that forgiveness. Then you can also understand like, oh, that's why perhaps in certain capacities I feel lonely or I feel like I can't talk about what I'm going through. I have to process it all on my own because that's what your mom was doing, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that insight. Yeah. And something else that you talk about in your work that you weave in is around Taoism.
Hmm.
And I'd love for you to share a little bit more about how you got connected to Taoism and what are some of the principles that you feel would be supportive for women as it relates to womb work.
Oh, I love this. Okay, so that was just through my own spiritual practice.
Hmm.
I learned energy healing through like Reiki, the modality, and there's some crossover with like Reiki and Taoism, but I've always just kind of had this connection to more of like the like Asian art forms. And I think it was like in like 2019, 2020, I started to get interested in tea, so Chinese ceremonial tea. And I started my own personal practice with like sitting down and every day having ceremonial tea. And this really kind of started to teach me about like energy and like life force and chi and like meditating and focusing my mind. I've always historically been somebody who like does not want to meditate, can't meditate. Like I'm very like bhakti and like creative. So I'm like, I want to like dance and that's my meditation, you know?
Hmm.
So it was really powerful for me to have this like practice where I could sit down and I could create something, my tea, and meditate and drop in. And a lot of the principles in Chadao, like that's the lineage that I practice, I started to find like a crossover in my womb work. So at that time, I was really interested in like, I still am very interested in it, softening and like slowing down and like cultivating our yin as women. And I found that that practice was my way of cultivating my yin,
Mm.
slowing down, doing nothing, not being productive, just being in a spacious environment where I could just drop into myself. And I started to learn that from that yin, from this cultivation practice where I'm meditating and being very silent, we sit for 3 bowls of tea minimum in silence. And then sometimes after that, I would like get my journal and write or like pull cards. I just found that so much more of my creative capacity started to open. And so this kind of was the start of me looking at Taoism and being like, whoa, like this is like cool for my feminine energy and what's happening inside me. And then I just started to deepen and I was like, oh, okay, there's so much more in like Taoist history and Taoist philosophy around feminine sexuality and like cultivating our eros, our life force energy, our chi, our shen, our jing. Like we can go deep and deep and deep into it.
Hmm.
But it's like a whole philosophy that's been practiced for thousands of years centered around cultivation,
Mm.
which is really attractive to me because as somebody who's like had to heal trauma,
Hmm.
had to die, crumble, like lose myself to find myself, find my power, and then be like, what do I want to create with this? Cultivation was a big piece for me of like, oh, okay, I can create with this and I can be a peaceful woman who is safe to be still and quiet, but also a powerful woman who's not afraid to speak her truth and pursue what she wants to, right?
Mm.
So that was kind of how it started. And really in my work now, like Taoism is a really big part of my own spiritual practice. And so naturally I do weave it into my work. But the primary lens that I weave that into my work through is cultivating sexual energy, cultivating our heart as women in Taoism, the Shen, which is like your true essence,
Mm.
your consciousness lives in your heart. And so, along with womb massage, I also teach breast massage and like how can we heal our heart as women so that our true essence can shine through.
Hmm.
So it's kind of ever evolving, with my own knowledge and skill set and like personal practice. But I find that it's such a beautiful like path for women to start to explore, especially if they have a tendency to like not feel safe and slowing down and, accessing more of those yin qualities, which is really important for women.
Mm. Yeah, it feels very, very complementary to
Yeah.
the work of connecting with the womb and to really access more of that feminine energy. And
Mhm.
yeah, I love that you're taking something that has really been supportive for you on your journey and like really weaving that all together. And I know that you have a facilitation program that you've created to support other women who want to step into womb work.
Mhm.
And I'd love for you to share just a little bit about what has it been like to create that facilitator program and for women who are curious about this path, either, for themselves on their own journey and or to start sharing this with others. Like, tell us a little bit more about your work and what you offer.
Thank you. Yeah. So I created Wave the Womb, and it's a facilitator training centered around womb work and like learning how to facilitate womb work. And I think what makes Wave the Womb really unique and like my lens and perspective is that we really are looking at the entire female body as the womb. And so it's very somatic. Yes, you learn hands on womb massage, like how to do abdominal massage, how to do internal pelvic floor work, how to do breast massage, but we're also looking at how to do breast massage and how to like guide women through somatic healing experiences where they can shift, the narratives that their stories have told them through their body. I
Mm,
think that a lot of women who have done like coaching or therapy, it's like you kind of figure out some point, like, I don't want to talk about my story anymore.
mm-hmm,
You need to feel it. And
mm-hmm,
so Way of the Womb is really unique because we're going into those feelings, we're going into those narratives, and we're using the body to alchemize it. And, some womb work out there, especially trainings, are going to really focus on more of like the medical anatomy of it all, which we totally go in, like we nerd out about like the anatomy in the female body. But what I'm interested in womb work is more of that somatic, psycho spiritual space where it's like, whoa, my body's holding a narrative that's creating my reality. How can I free that? How can I,
mm,
free that so that I can access like the quantum space inside my female body, deepen my relationship with my womb, and go create a big, powerful life that's needed.
mm,
So we kind of get into a lot of different elements that are, a big balance of, like I said, the psycho spiritual mix with the anatomy and the physical.
mm,
Breast massage, womb massage, internal pelvic floor work, somatic experiences, how to guide women through their womb story, yoni steams. And then we also go into like Taoism and even some like psychic, energetic work too. So it's very ceremonial.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, sounds like a really comprehensive journey, which I
Uh-huh.
love. And yeah, I can tell that the women in your space really get to learn from someone who's been through this and who
Yeah.
has like the lived embodied wisdom to share.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's taken me a long time to be ready. I
Mhm.
had client after client who had like walked through their own transformational journey with me, who are practitioners in their own right, be like, "Can you teach me this?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't think I'm ready yet." And then finally I had a client who asked me and I was like, "Actually, yeah, like I feel ready." And so that was kind of the unraveling, and then over time created the practitioner training, and
Mm,
it's been really cool because there's so much that goes into the female body that we just don't know. And a lot of healers, like they just don't know how to talk about the womb.
mhm.
It's taboo and there's like nuance there. And like I think that once you have the knowledge and the education, it just effortlessly flows and you know how to hold that space.
Yeah, beautiful. And I
Mhm.
think you have an online course of some sort as well if women maybe aren't ready for the facilitator training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called the Nectar Path. And so the Nectar Path is really a self paced journey that is all about connecting with your womb, your sensuality as a woman. It's really based in the Taoism perspectives. And so it's like a full audio training. So it's the kind of thing where you can like pop in your headphones and like go for a hike and, receive the information. And then we have 9 practices that it guides you through that are like movement practices, somatic practices, as well as like breast massage, womb massage, self worship through like yoni work.
Mm,
So it's definitely great for somebody that's like, I want to try this out and I want to feel this and I want to deepen my relationship with my womb, but I want to be guided
yeah.
in your own private space, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we're going to make sure to link all that info in the show notes. And where can our listeners find you after they listen to this episode?
Awesome. You can find me at Taraney Nicole on Instagram.
Hmm.
And that's really the best place where I, share a lot of my work and, what I'm doing in the world. And I think that our next round of the practitioner training will open up in February 2026.
Okay.
So keep a lookout for that if you're definitely feeling the calling to trade in womb work.
Beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for being here. And I'm excited for our listeners to really get to explore this realm of deepening their connection with their bodies and their wombs. Thank you for your
Mhm.
wisdom.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.